we need this for the online. Yes, I think we can start. Good evening, everybody. Like here in the room, in the dark room, and everybody online, thank you for joining us. Well, it's a big pleasure, of course, because we have 3 colleagues, but also very dear friends from a long time. And I wanted to organize this lecture and sharing for many years. So finally, we managed to have all the 3 of them. So we have Professor Michele Mauri, Professor Angela Spriones, and Gabriele Colombo. They all come from Politecnico di Milano, and they all work at the Density Design Lab, which is a visualization lab. Politecnico, I will leave you to explain a little bit more. But for me, like, my joy comes from the fact that it's also the place where I studied originally, and where together with them and other people that came over the years, around 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, we started to have to use the concept of data and to work on data visualization as a design field in communication and visual design. So 20 years ago, for all of you that remember, data were like very at the starting point, and now kind of data are all over our life. So a lot of things happens for research and also for education. So one of the reasons why the lab was created, because we were training designer to work with data and to do communication projects that were based on data. So there is quite a lot of history, and I'm very happy that I can share the approach of the lab with you. And also, thanks for joining us this week. We worked for all the week for future project. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Francesca, for having invited us. Actually, our pleasure to be your guest, and also to your lab for organizing this event. And well, today we will try to provide you an idea of our approach to working with data and to working with visual artifact starting from data. And actually the title is Data as Artifact, Visualizing Complex Social Issues, which is a quite bold title. And I will try to explain why we titled it, in particular, the first part. And well, before starting, a few words about us. We are a research lab in Politecnico di Milano in the design department. And actually our lab stems from communication design studies. So all the studies about, well, communication design, but also in particular of visual design. And our research, this is our last description, and says that our research revolves around information visualization, tackling design challenges arising from visual representation of social and cultural phenomena. And this lab, as Francesca said, have a quite long history. It was funded some 20 years ago, not by us, of course, since at least for me, I was just a student at the time. It was funded by the group, the original group made by Paolo Ciuccarella, Francesca Valsecchi, Donato Ricci, and others. And over the time, well, from the beginning, the focus was how can we leverage our knowledge on visual design for representing data. That was the starting point. And over the time, this approach evolved and changed, and I will tell you what we are doing today. So the agenda for this night is, well, actually 3 main points. So our approach to the research, how we handle what we do in our research into didactical activities, and the relationship with applied research. So I will start from the first one, going in order. So our approach. as I said, we work on this relationship between data and design. Broadly, we can define that this is the macro area, data and design, the relationship between these two fields. How can we work, how can we use in the best way our knowledge as visual designer in this relationship? And well, one thing that we can now take for granted, but it was not some years ago, let's say some 15 years ago, data was seen as something new that in a while it was possible to have at a large scale. Everyone went crazy about this data, and data was seen as the new oil of the economy. There was this kind of statement of data as something that is really valuable and that we have just to take it and get value out of data. And we, like oil, we can drill down and pump tons of data and build our empire, our digital and technological empires. And of course, data is not oil, it's a metaphor. And, but it's interesting as a metaphor because it was presented, data was presented as a material, as something that is present out there. We have just to take it and give it shape. And this is something that we well know as designer. Well, not me, because no, I'm not a product designer, but designer in general takes materials and use it to craft their own design. Chairs, tables, whatever we design. So this idea that data is a material that can be more or less raw and we can take it and use it to design something else. Actually, this was something taken for granted some 15 years ago. Data was a face value, something, of course, objective, something not mediated, like a raw material. But actually, from the beginning, actually, already Rob Kitchen, in his book, Data Revolution in 2014, started to actually question this kind of approach. And he stated that while many analysts may accept data as a face value and treat them as if they are neutral, objective, and pre-analytical in nature, well, actually, data do not exist independently of the ideas, the instrument, the practices and context knowledge used to generate and process to analyze them. Or, as Joanna Drucker put in another way, data is not something given. It's not something out in the wild. It's something that we take. It's something that we create. We build it as an interpretation of the phenomenal world of, we can call it, reality. And from this approach, we get this idea of presenting data as an artifact. The data not as something out there, but as something that is a result of a design process. So data is like a chair, like a table, like a website or a poster. Data is the result of a design process. The fact that people designing data doesn't self-recognize as designer doesn't matter. The fact that the people with a formal training in design maybe doesn't know the methods and the practices for building and analyzing data doesn't change, again, the fact that data is the result of a design process. We see it as a process in two steps. So we have phenomenon in the world, in the society. And then we start with the representation process. The first step of this representation process is to translate it into a data model. So whatever is the phenomenon that we want to represent, we have to make choices. We want to represent, I don't know, for example, an example that I often use is poverty in a country. How do we measure it? Which kind of dimension do we want to use? Which instrument do we use to measure these dimensions? How do we analyze it? What we keep and what we left out? All these choices are influenced by, of course, our ethics, our knowledge, or our prior knowledge, our goals, and to different people, and indeed in different countries. For example, the same phenomenon is represented through data in different ways that actually translate their approach to the topic. And again, from the data model, we have a second step in which we translate this first representation into something visual. And so this is the main point that I wanted to stress out in terms of our approach. That is that data is the result of a design process. I already said that. It's a design process that we often delegate to someone else. I don't know if any one of you designs something with data. Usually you start with a data set. And maybe also from this approach that people with an education in design see data as a material, as something that is not produced by them, but actually we are just delegating part of the design process to someone else that are the data analysts, the people who define methodologies, people who collect the data, analyze it, and so on. And just to be clear, this is something good. We often have to delegate part of our design process. Probably no one starts from scratch every time for designing something. We start from known structure. We start from already elaborated things. For example, we can use template. I come from the field of graphic design. So for an example is using templates or using a set of icons designed by someone else. This is something that we do always in our practice and is perfectly normal. The main point is to be aware of that. In the moment in which I delegate part of the design process, could be useful to know to whom we are delegating this part of the design process, and also if ask to ourselves if and how we should make visible these inherited choices. So, well, a common pattern in data visualization is, of course, to put a citation to the sources. That's a way, of course, to make it clear, but sometimes that it's not enough. So one thing that we often prompt our students to think about is try to understand not just who produced that data, but why, which is the reason for producing that data. Someone put the time, money, and effort in creating that data set. Why they put all this effort? And what was the original goal, and which are the methods used to collect the data. And that's always interesting. For example, if there are categories, how the categories are defined, which is the definition of the element that we have in our data. So the general approach is this idea of seeing data as the result of a design process. And the other starting point in our work is to see application fields as a source of design problems. As a research lab, we work a lot on different kind of projects, and the main point is to find challenges. That's the main point. As visual designer, our goal is to find new visual solution, and to find new visual solution, we need new problems. And usually we can identify three main problems. I will go in more details in a while. So there can be visual problems. I cannot visualize my data with the existing technologies. There are problems of representation, so the process of moving from the phenomenon itself, I don't know, the poverty, to something visual. So how can we create this movement? And also, finally, the problems that arise in the moment in which we have a mediation of data. In the moment in which we pass through data in our design process, some new problems could arise. We work on many fields like digital humanities, people in the humanities, using digital techniques to make their analysis, and data activism, media studies, so people studying how digital platforms influence our society, and social sciences. And we do it working on three main things that are research, didactics, and applied project. And Gabriele and Angeles will go more in detail on the applied projects and on the didactical activities that we create. But one thing that I want to stress is the fact that in our practice, these three elements are really tied together. So what we do as research inform our didactics and the applied projects, but also the way around, the didactics inform our research, and also this is true for applied projects. We do it mainly, we do our research mainly with an approach called research through design that probably you have already heard about. But the idea is that by designing things, we design things to make a reflection on the design process. So it's much more important, the process and its formalization rather than the result. And we do this on a series of different media, and like from visualization for newspapers to exhibitions, to we can call also data physicalization. So moving toward different means of expression of visualizing this data. And for us, it's also interesting every time to see which are the constraints that the different kind of format pose to our design process, and also how to solve and mitigate them. Yeah. And all this process is that moving from these problems to produce something that can be used again, that can be reused. This is the typical path of our project. So defining the problem, doing the research, developing a project, and then by publishing the process that comes from this project. And we have three main areas of interest. The first one is related to data visualization methods. And that is when we, as I said, we have a problem and we have to find a visual solution. How can we do it? I will show just one example because it took too many time. But to make an example, this is a project that we did a few years ago with some researchers that were working on the exchange of money through in Europe through offshore investment. In European Union, as you may know, we have different taxation in the different countries. And so the researchers identified the fact that sometimes this kind of investment went through a series of countries, probably just to reduce the amount of taxes that they had to pay. And they collected all this data, but the problem was, how can we visualize this information? And with them, we identify a possible visual solution that is this kind of visualization in which we have in blue and green some normal direct investment, while in orange and violet, the mediated one, and also each bar is a country. What came out is that there are some countries in Europe that act as conduits for this kind of operation. Also, each bar is a country. What came out is that there are some countries in Europe that act as conduits for this kind of operation. Another thing that was interesting was the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty about this data. We don't know actually the size of these exchanges. And also in that case, we leverage on our visual experience to show, well, this kind of information, the fact that we don't know the size of these exchanges. So for example, here we have a sort of gradient, and the idea of this gradient is to show the fact that, well, more or less, this is the size, but we are not completely sure. And another example is on this set of problem is a tool that we created that is called, in collaboration with other groups, which is called rograph.io. And the idea was to provide the sketching tools to visual designers to bootstrap their visualization. With this tool, you can easily create the backbone of a visualization. So again, this is not a complete authoring tool, but it's an open source tool meant to be expandable that allow other people to access, create visualizations, visual representation of data. And yeah, a second group is a critique of data visualization. So what are the critical points in data visualization? And an example is this project that is called Atlante Calvino that we did in collaboration. Well, actually, the principal investigator was Francesca Serra, which is a researcher on Italo Calvino, is a famous author in Italy, an Italian writer. And in this case, the point was, how can we identify new visual tools to allow new kind of analysis for humanists? And in this case, was not just finding the right visualization for the data, but rather using visual tools to create new analysis, new understanding of the work of this writer. And finally, the last area of interest is the digital design and the digital mediation. So sometimes, well, many times, the digital doesn't just provide data, but it also directly impact on society. How can we visualize this impact, or how can we use this impact of social media platform and web platform to understand something about the society? And for example, on this project called the Urban Biodiversity Observatory, we analyzed that this was part of a larger project that we have in Italy on biodiversity. And the idea was to use social media, like in this case, TikTok, to understand how people perceive and talk about animals. And Yes, so this is to provide a quick overview. Well, it was not so quick, but an overview of what we do. And now Gabriele will show you how we deal with that in didactics.
Thank you. And it's nice that you end with this project, because this is exactly how I will start. So when we do in our teaching activities, what we try to do is to connect what we do as researcher with what we teach during our courses. So I'll try to present our teaching activities, didactical activities, try to show you how we link them to our own research project. So the context of our main research project of the last 2 years was this National Biodiversity Future Center, which is a big research center in Italy, focused on, with the goal of monitoring and preserving biodiversity in the Italian context. Our role in this very, very national center, made of, well, researchers that are studying different aspects of biodiversity, can be summarized with this claim. So our goal was to try to understand what role digital technologies and digital media have in promoting our relationship with biodiversity. So for example, if you think about, there are many ways in which we can think about the intersection between digital technologies and the environment and urban diversity. Some of them are more based, like following an idea of monitoring and controlling our landscape. So for example, there are many projects that use satellite images to map urban trees and trees in different parts of the world. But some other times, digital technologies also sort of provide a space for more intimate ways of connecting with nature and other non-human beings. So this is a webcam that is streaming on the top of a regional government building in Milan that is documenting live every day the life of these two falcon. Well, these are two birds. I don't remember the exact name in English. But what's interesting about this fact is that there is a webcam, and then around the life of these two animals, there are online communities that emerge that are focused on following the life of these two animals. And they, through social media, in this case Facebook, there is the space for creating new ways of relationship with animals. So this is sort of the frame of our research into the relationship between digital media and urban biodiversity. So urban biodiversity in and through the digital. So given this framework, we did a lot of stuff in our research project in 2 years, focusing on different social media platforms and see how they create different ways to interact with animals and plants. So for example, we look at how which emojis are most used on TikTok when people share videos of animals, try to map what kind of different emotions and feelings are most often associated with different animals. And if you look at this visualization, you will see that some animals tend to attract happy and cute feeling, while other tend to be more often shared with well, emojis that are a signal of different feelings like fear, being scared of, or also surprise. We also look at how generative AI tools depict and give shape to imaginary of biodiversity. So for example, here you see how different text-to-image generative tools depict and produce images of biodiversity and other stuff. This was our research project. So the idea really to look at how different social media platforms can provide a glimpse into the relationship that we have with plants and animals in urban spaces. As I said at the beginning, what we try to do is to always try to find the link between our research activities and our didactical activities. So for 2 years, following this format or this framework of engaged research-led teaching, we try to find ways to mix our research work with our teaching, but also try to look outside of university, outside of academia, try to link our studies with what we teach, but also to what happens outside of our university. So for 2 years, we involved more than 100 students, and these are their names, and I will try to leave these slides as much as I can, because I think that this is well, most of what I will show in the next slides are, was only possible with the work of these more than 100 students. And we involved them into our research activity around this topic of urban biodiversity. So we organized 2 exhibitions, one, all of them dedicated to the, this idea that we can look at social media as a window into our relationship with plants and animals in city. We organized these 2 exhibitions. The first one on the left that was more dedicated to debates around the topic of urban biodiversity, and the second one, which I will focus on these last 5 minutes, was dedicated to this. It's in Italian, the subtitle, but this idea that we can have digital encounter with biodiversity through TikTok, Facebook, and other social media. So this was the cover of our exhibition, and I'll try now to show you, talk a little bit about the process that the students follow, and also showing a few results. So the framework of this exhibition and the course that we had, we took it from a research group from the UK called Digital Ecologies, that talk about this idea of that, like, invite us to think about digital encounters with plant and animals as more than real, rather than something that is an approximation of the real world. So what they do in that paper that is a little bit small there, they really try to push this idea that the way in which we encounter plants and animals in the digital sphere sometimes is even more than real than the encounters that we have in real life in the city. So this was our framework that we borrow from this group of researchers, and we try to think about different ways in which we can study and develop this concept. So we give to the students 8 topics that are both about species, so problematic species, animals in the city that might cause harm, and they need to be sort of managed by those who are in charge, but also different means that we have to encounter animals and plants. So for example, one project that I will not show here focus on live cam footage of animals that are present, some in a lot of parts of Italy, and then they are shared again on social media. The process that the students follow is sort of a 3-step process. So we give them a topic, they choose among the topic that we give them, then they go online, they found the most suitable sources of online data, they collect data, they have a first phase that is sort of a research phase where they use this data to ask interesting questions and then provide answer through data visualization. And then in the second part of the course, they transform this collected and enriched data and their analysis into an exhibition artifact. And the idea behind the exhibition artifact that they need to produce is around this concept of republishing data. So what we ask them is to take their spreadsheet, their tables, and find interesting and creative way to republish this data in a way that can create sort of engagement with people that might not be really versed into looking at tables and spreadsheets, but they might be interested in the topic. And the output is really open. This is, I should say that this is the last course of the master, of the students. What we really try to push the student towards is to explore as many formats that they can. So we don't tell them you should use the data to create a visualization, a poster, or a video, but we really leave them open to explore with every format that they like, also based on what their own experience. So the output are very different. They go from video installation to website with strange interaction mode to printed catalog and so on. So in this last year, these were the topics, and I will just briefly show you two of them. These are not necessarily the best one, but they're good to give you an idea of the different output that they might be produced. So the first one is gray and brown squirrel. I will just make a very small introduction to the topic if you're not aware of why it's interesting to study these two type of squirrels. And the issue in Italy, at least, is that there is a native squirrel, the one on the right, the small and brown squirrel, and then which is a native squirrel from Italy and Europe, and then we have an American species, so the gray one, that is invasive in Italy. So it might seem irrelevant, but it's actually a big problem because the invasive squirrel are taking over the population of brown squirrel. If you look online, there's a lot of debate about this, both on news sources, that they sort of tend to frame this topic with the war language. So they talk about a war between the two squirrels. And also on social media, people are very passionate about this topic. I wasn't expecting this, but you will find, at least in the Italian online space, a lot of discussion about this fight between these two squirrels. So the students collected more than 1,000 comments from Instagram, YouTube, X, Reddit, TikTok, and Facebook that were sort of talking about this phenomena, this animal. They produce a data set, so they collect the data set from different platforms, they analyze it, both with computational methods, but also with qualitative techniques. So they read through the comments, try to categorize them, try to see what was the content of each comment. And then they produce in the research phase a number of visualizations that have the goal of sort of mapping the debate around this topic. So you'll see here that different comments, different position and statements around the gray and brown squirrel. So there are people that talk about the fact that we must take action against this problem. There are comments that are more about, well, we cannot do anything about it, so let's just leave it there, and so on. The students, while doing this analysis, they also found something very interesting, the fact that squirrels were mentioned more often in relation to other animals and other subjects. So this comment, which is a very, I try to translate it because it's in Italian, but more or less what this comment is trying to say is that we are, there is a sort of a bias. We look at animals in different ways. So it's not right that there's such a large debate online about protecting squirrels, but when it comes to bugs and insects, nobody cares because insects are ugly and nobody wants to have them in their city. So this particular data point was the suggestion for the student to work on this idea. So they went back to the data set and they look into reference to other subjects. So they were interested in seeing when squirrels are compared to other entities, which other entities are there and why. So other subjects most frequently mentioned in reference to gray and brown squirrel in online comments. What they did with this information, they create a video that present all the different references that are made in relation to the squirrel. So we see that there are other animals that are compared to squirrel as victims, other animals that are compared to squirrels because they are cute, solutions proposed, and the other little elements. So they really did a sort of an investigative work into references that are used to talk about squirrels. So also the style that they use, the graphical style, is really sort of an evocation of this investigation work, or like try to really make a typology, a catalog of all references that are used in when talking about squirrels. Very quickly, I will talk about the second project, which was another way of interacting with nature. So when we think about nature in the city, we often think about what happens outside of our home, but what we wanted to study with this project was also the nature that we have inside our home, so indoor plants. So this group worked on online communities around indoor plants. So all places online, social media, where people share their photos of their plants and they ask for advice, tips, and they share information. They create a data set working with different social media. And then with this data set, they generate a first draft visualization that was then turned into a table. What you see here in this table is also a visualization, so we could call it sort of a data physicalization. Each of these rectangles is resized according to the number of mentions that each plant has in the data set. So bigger squares are also the one dedicated to plants that are more often mentioned online. And then they produce this little beautiful book, in my opinion, where you can browse through all the online comments found in the dataset. And they give you sort of an overview of how each plant, indoor plant, is discussed online, how different plants are more popular than others, and what are the more often more frequent comments and phrases and words that are shared online dedicated to each plant. And this is it. Then we had a nice exhibition with a good first day where there were a lot of people, and it's also a nice moment for the students to sort of look at the reward of the work. And this is it, and I will now leave the floor to Angeles to talk about.
Thank you. I will show you how also at density, the last part of this triangle between didactics, research is applied research. Exactly. So we choose among all of the different projects to showcase specifically this project, which is called Supercharged by AI, which is an exhibition, actually. This is a project founded by a European grant from the foundation, Gulbenkian Foundation, and we were partners with two other institutions. One is the network of libraries in Europe, and the other is Tactical Tech, which is an organization that for more than 20 years is conducting research and activist work in information activism. So the thing is, and it's very connected to what we are actually teaching with and doing with our students, is that we were asked to design an exhibition that happens to be in 10 different countries around Europe, in more than 50 events. And the main idea of this exhibition was to talk about how AI is actually injecting or supercharging social phenomena societal issues actually that are already happening on the web, but AI is actually like putting a lot more of out of control and more, let's say, supercharging these societal phenomena. So these 4 topics that you can see were the main arguments, the main topics that were part of this exhibition. So the thing is that as designers and researchers working and designing with data, we will ask ourselves how we can design an exhibition where we can talk about these topics and based on data. So for this exhibition, you will see that the output was very towards low tech. This is something that we defined from the very beginning, since we had to develop this in more than 50 different exhibitions around Europe. So we end with 5 posters and 2 books. And well, you can see here some pictures of the exhibition in different parts of Europe, like in Croatia, in Spain, in Italy, and so on. I want to show you 2 of the artifacts that are part of this exhibition. One is a stereotype machine. Actually, I will start with it. And the second one is called Stories of Online Harassment. So Stereotype Machine, this is the title of 2 books that were printed. And I will introduce the idea that with this project, we were trying to expose to visitors about how AI is supercharging the amplification of stereotypes. So stereotypes already exist, but through image generation, what actually is happening, and it's not only happening with image generation, but also with other type of large language models or other models at all, is that many stereotypes are being amplified. And if we are not aware about this, we will probably could get into a bigger problem and societal issues that can be expanded. So in this case, with the stereotype machine, we start doing research. Actually, you should know we are designers, we work with data, so we do a lot of research for understanding the topic. And after doing research, we came with these ideas like, okay, if we want to talk about the amplification of stereotypes, how we can communicate, how we can also design an artifact that is capable to be part of an exhibition for people to know the problem and reflect over it. So in this case, we define knowledge objectives. We define what are the main objectives that we want to communicate through this artifact. So I will not go into each of them, but generally speaking, we wanted to introduce to people the idea that when you are generating an image, that is not magic. Actually, there's a training data set behind, full of biases. There's a model that is actually doing predictions over that image. And we were not very into explaining the technicalities of how models works. Rather, we wanted to show that behind that magic, there's no magic at all. So how we thought about putting these knowledge objectives into something, in an artifact, was through printing these, presenting social structures and social situations as interpreted by AI through generated images of families and workers. So we choose these 2 situations and social situations. And through ambiguous prompting, we generate books of families and workers of different nationalities. We were also taking the advantage that this exhibition was going around 10 different countries. So we used the nationalities of those 10 different countries for putting this ambiguous prompt on action. So this is the thing. When we are generating images, I think that many of you have generated images using different models. Okay, so when we generate images, we are in front of only one single image, and well, we can generate many images at all. So the thing is that by using prompts like generate an Estonian family or generate a photo of a Portuguese family, you can have an image in front of you. The thing is that when we start looking closely to a collection of this image in a glance or in a same grid, we can start discovering patterns and see that the model is actually repeating certain features of the image that we might think that those are stereotypes. So exactly this strategy of using ambiguous prompt, generating grids of images for different nationalities was our idea for creating these books. But we went a step forward. We wanted also to highlight the differences of this grid of images. That's how we used the cutouts in different layers for different elements in all of those images. So you can see that in the case of the books for workers, we extract 3 different layers in which we have objects, we have the persons, and we also have the background or the environment where the image is being, where the workers were set. So this strategy of using cutouts, of using grid compositions of many images generated using the same prompt for different nationalities was exactly the strategy for many images generated using the same prompt for different nationalities was exactly the strategy for creating the book. So in this case, you can see a grid of a family. If you take some seconds, you can see that this family could be an Italian family. So you can discover it because there are certain colors, there are certain patterns. So again, the idea is how we can highlight these patterns and differences. So that's why we cut out all of the different faces of the people in the image, the way they were dressed, their bodies, and also the environment, the landscape. So we did this, again, in a very low-tech way. We print on transparent paper the different layers, so you can put one over the other, and then you can see the complete image. So this was the strategy, and we organized this through a book in which we ask the reader to find out the main differences and try to figure out which nationality was each different grid of images. And after that, we also organized the book in a way in which after you guess which nationality each family is, you can go through and unpeel each image and get a closer detail of how these patterns and repetitions happened. So also something that Michele presented at the very beginning is that we are very into looking for solutions that are not only regarding the final output, also regarding the tools that we need for doing these processes. Since we were like in front of generating a lot of images and a lot of cutting out, we developed a small tool that you can find also in the Density Design GitHub. And it's a tool that generates the grid of images and the different cutouts for the different layers. So this type of approach also to think how to, I will not say automatize, because this tool is actually not completely automatizing the whole process, but it really helps us to also get open the process and in the future to continue working with other nationalities. And in the very last minutes, I want to introduce the last project from the same exhibition. This is the project about the stories of online harassment. The reason why we present you this is because here we are applying much of what also was introduced by Michele and Gabriele, putting on practice digital methods for looking, for doing research, and then to shift that research into an artifact that could be part of an exhibition for the public. So online harassment, again, is a societal issue that exists for many long. What is doing AI is that now it's like really putting, accelerating very much and scaling this phenomenon. So while we did our research, we find out that there are different types of harassments happening online in very different digital spaces. And it's happening because they're very okay, a great variety of reasons and relationships between the victim and the harasser. This is a very sensible topic, and we were asking ourselves again how we can design with data something that can communicate the complexity of this issue. So we put our own knowledge objectives were like to tell about the fact that there are many different online harassments happening, and they happen in different places, and again, all of these different points that you can see in this slide. What we did, again, you have to think about that we are not experts about online harassment. We learned, we did a research, and then we find out that a way of explaining what is online harassment, again, a very sensible topic, was to learn from the stories of people that experience online harassment themselves. So we went to a platform, to Reddit. We looked for different queries, and we were able to scrape different posts and posts from different subreddits about people that were posting about their experience of online harassment. From this, we collect more than, I can't remember now, but like 180 stories. We code each of these stories according different dimensions. We read each single story, and we discover that in each of them, there was a sort of a structure that was very, very useful for us to understand how to read and make sense of what is online harassment. So after reading each story, we highlight and we extract different dimensions from each. And then we understood that we were talking about more than, we discovered that in all of these stories, we have around 14 types of online harassment. Actually, some types, we didn't know them. We learned about the different, let's say, motivation of why the harassment happens. So harassment is not only sexual, it also happens because of different reasons, religious, gender-related, and so on. And it also happened in the most amazing, no, not amazing, but surprising digital spaces, like not only in game platforms, but also in Duolingo or in other platforms that are like totally not for chatting or for meeting people. So after that, we come out with this design that is actually, it looks like a network, because we discovered that the stories of online harassment are very connected. Many people were like experiencing harassment types that were very close, even if they have like small differences. And I will explain this network. So if we get closer, we can see that each node corresponds to a story. It's a story that has 3 layers of color that are printed, overlaid one over the other. So each node is a story and is connected to different types of harassment, which are these black rhombos that are there. The idea of printing one part of the text one over the other is because we also develop a lens, web app that works as a lens that allows you to decode what is printed overlaid. So with this lens, we were like somehow designing, let me see if I put it here, no. We were designing a friction that is making the visitor to spend more time reading those very sensible stories. Instead of just being there and looking to a poster, we were expecting that people get closer, take time with the story, and have a more intimate space with the poster in general. So actually the app is online if you want to take a look. So let me see if this works. Yes. So this is a prototype. It's a very old prototype, but the idea is that you get closer with your smartphone, and according to the color, you can decode and only read the layer of color that is visible in there. So yeah, it's exactly, if we can decode this by using the different lenses, you can read what is about the digital spaces of these stories. And you will see that stories are closer and are clusterized because they're very similar in terms that they happened in the same digital space. Or the relationship between the victim and the harasser. Many times it's not something that is happening because of a stranger that is harassing you, but we were surprised to find out that actually also relatives can harass their relatives. And finally, we were very into looking into the reason why, even if there's no one reason to know about harassment. After reading the stories, we were able to categorize them if they were happening because of economical reasons, religion, gender related, and so on. So it was a very sensible project. We tried to have a lot of respect about the stories of people that experience this. All of the data is anonymized, and actually we work a little bit on rephrasing them in order to make them fit into a poster. Finally, something that we are very glad because of this triangle that we present at the beginning between research, didactics, and applied research, is that we also learn about our own projects. And in this case, with this project, we have the chance to evaluate it and to see if what we are designing with data and in a visual translation is actually becoming an obstacle or is an activator for the knowledge that we were expecting that the visitors could gain after reaching the exhibition. So we are looking forward this paper that might be published in some more days, well, who knows, about looking into a way in which we think about our visual design in terms of knowledge activators according to the knowledge objectives that I showed you at the beginning. So how we can, from the graphic point of view, using data, how we can reach these objectives through the knowledge activators that is our design. So yeah, I think that we finished. So thank you so much for staying until the end.
Thank you. So I have some question. I was just checking if anybody online is sending some feedback, but I would open the floor if anybody in the room has something to share or to ask, and otherwise I'll give you some comments myself.
Thank you for the sharing. It's a very, very interesting topic you share. I'm very interested in the last one you share about AI. In that case, the AI is the research subject, right? But when we thinking AI as a research tool, do you as a data visualizer think it's helpful in the visualization process? Or do you think it's any helpful in any process of this design process, for example, like data collection, analysis, or visualization? And this is the first question. And I also have the second one, because myself is an environmental designer. So I'm expecting that a visualized data can help for a next step further. For example, I want my client to see the visualized data, and we can co-create a design strategy together. But sometimes I feel there's like a gap in between, because the data can be very beautiful, very helpful, very easy to understand. But when the client interprets the map we're making, they may find some like difficulty. Also, in the co-creation process, the map may be unhelpful. So do you have any comments or tips for us during this process? Thank you.
Yes. Well, I think actually we can all answer to this. It's not only about me. But I think that AI and also data visualization are both tools. And it's not that they're good, bad. No, it's about how we use the tools. So I personally encounter myself using AI in my data process. I'm learning actually how to improve my process using AI. But again, it's since it's a tool, we need to learn that behind that tool there are many political decisions. But that's another different discussion. But also because it's a tool, it's up to us how we can use the tools, right? So from my perspective, in my own process, I've been using it mostly for making some processes of what I already collect. For example, using ChatGPT for organizing or extracting words from my qualitative data set or things like that. I mean, I'm still in my own learning process of how I can use AI as a process in visualizing, but mostly working with data. I haven't used AI at all for visualizing anything, but probably generating images, but that's not visualizing at all from my point of view. And I don't know if you want to include something to that answer.
No, well, just one thing. I think that, well, there are several studies undergoing and trying to understand the relationship between the usage of models and visualization. I think that it's something that we cannot avoid. We cannot pretend that no one or that we won't use models for making data visualization. But again, I think that it's important trying to every time be aware and ask ourselves which are the choices that we are inheriting by using that tool. If I use that tool to create categories in my data set, which is very practical because making categories, so I have a data set, I have to divide it into several groups. It's just an example. It's a very boring process. And asking to a model to do it, it's really great. But at the same point, we should try to understand why the model is categorizing in some sort of way the data or not. So I think it's, again, a matter of awareness of the choices that we are inheriting from the tools that we're using. While on the second question, now I forgot it. Yeah, the visualization for the processing. If I got it,
you say that the data is designed, the design result of you, right? But for me, as an environmental designer, I'm expecting these visualized data can be a helpful tool for me for the next step of design. Maybe we can make co-creation strategy together. But sometimes I feel that a very perfect and understandable visualized data cannot always lead into a very efficient strategy. So I feel there is a gap. Do you have any comments or tips for that?
Yeah. So if I understood well, if I understand it well, it's a matter of visual literacy of the stakeholders. So people using that map that is well designed, that you can see clear insight, for them is not clear how to read it and understand it. And this is a problem that, well, in the literature is called really the matter of visual literacy of people. That is, there is some noise. It's coming back, the audio. Okay, now it's better, sorry. And so the problem, of course, it's not your or of your visualization, but how to improve this literacy of the people. And there are, it's a very complex problem. In my opinion, what is possible to do, I don't know if it's your case, is trying to create this literacy in your to the people that you have to show your visualization. So to introduce and explain them how the visualization work before showing the visualization itself. But I understand the problem because not often we have the time and the means to do both this movement. explain how to read and decode, and then show you the visualization and get the decoding. So I know that it's not a real answer, but I don't know if you have to add something on that.
I think that it's not something that we can solve in the same way that any conversation tool or conversation dynamic is made to be experienced by the people that you are, the stakeholder that would be involved at that specific time, right? So one thing is that maybe it was not, like one thing that we use in teaching, and I do it here, but it comes also from the tradition that we have, that there is always like a context in which the visualization are presented. And this context may be given sometimes if it's, for example, a newspaper page, there would be a very clear agenda or a very kind of accurate title, or it would be like an explanation, they say something. So like elements of the language that are more familiar to whoever is interacting with that piece in particular. And I mentioned this because when we started many years ago, there were not that many visualizations that were given to people. But now, if you think about your phone, you have maybe 15 apps that are producing graphics for like diagrams for you every day, and your brain just go through all of these things automatically. And so what is the literacy that has been created over years for the ordinary users of general apps? Or what is the literacy that has been created for a professional setting, like when you are talking with your stakeholder, when you're talking with your project partners or whatever. So this is a very delicate, and is only the practice that can create the context of working. And so like making the context very clear, I think it's a good argument to make the relationship grow over time. So maybe one session or one encounter won't be perfect, but then you're building the communication with them, like in any sort of communication process that can happen. Anybody else? Yeah, just bring it back. Thank you. Well, while you think, if you have something else, I want to add a couple of things and try to phrase them as a question. And well, is related about this idea of literacy. Like we give, like somehow we give for granted that people is able to understand images in a more like intuitive way, which is not necessarily the case. And so for me, it's interesting this idea that like you're presenting data as a material for reflecting and not only for measuring. So I think that the sharing is also about like a design capacity of like looking at this knowledge process using a material that is generated in this society, because this is a like digitalized society, and maybe 20 years ago, 50 years ago was not the case. And so there would have been not as much interest to do this material, in the same way that when plastic has been invented, then a lot of things start to be done with plastic. And so how we are using this. But the question is, I want to also mention something that for me is important, is that even though we're talking about data in a digitalized way, in particular with like these digital methods practice, data, like every time that we do courses, and not only us, but our colleague as well, we show cases of visualization that are beautifully designed, that comes from the 19th century. Probably the earliest example that we always do is from the, I think it's like 18th century even, and it's something about the Napoleonic army going back and forth Russia, or nurses that were counting death because there was like a pandemic or something. So it's not like the visualization is not something that is related to the digital society, but is related to kind of like a knowledge process and an interest of humans to look at reality from different point of view. So I think this is important. Now we have technology issue, but hundreds of years, like me, probably we have been visualizing things for since we are in communities. So I think that this is important also to mention, because the complex social issue are not a contemporary thing, but it's something that has always been existing. And this is one other comment, and maybe you can have some feedback, is that this is like this capability or these skills come from maybe a visual side or a visual heritage of like communication designer. Then you are working with people from computer science that has computational capabilities, and maybe you are working with scientists, which has knowledge from the ground of the subject that is being studied. So it's kind of like visualization it presents itself as a interdisciplinary or a collaborative kind of effort to make sense of reality from different perspectives. So I think this is good. Like it makes it very interesting, at least for me. Do you agree?
I want to say something that connects to what she asked, that like if you frame it like this way, there's also space for ugly visualizations. Like as designers, we are always tend to like aim for like everything needs to be very clean and perfect. And if you take visualization as a process of knowledge production, there's also space for very ugly, unfinished visualization. So maybe like to connect what Francesca was saying to your question of when people don't understand visualization, there's also a space for making them ugly but easy to understand and to use, in my opinion.
No, okay. No, I don't have other things. Do you have other comments?
No, I don't. Yes, but it's okay.
No. Well, the only thing that I wanted to add up is when you say that from during lesson we often show example from the past, like Maynard, Napoleonic arm, and so on. And what I think that it's interesting is, as you said, it's not something new, this kind of representation. And in general, this is something that for me, it's really interesting, the fact that visualization is one kind of representation of something. I mean, we have many kind of ways to represent things. We can make drawings, we can actually make a copy of an object. Another way is to measure the object and create visual items from these measures. And yeah, and it's not something new, but still this fact of literacy is relevant. I think it's improving. I mean, people are more and more used to visualization, as you said. We are much more in contact with visual representation of data and with the idea of actually representing phenomenon through data. But I think that many things have to be done actually. In Europe, for sure, we have a program on that. And it's on visual literacy. And the idea is to increase it from the kids, but of course it will be a long process. Also because, I mean, it's not a formal language. It's a visual, like we say sometimes a visual language, but it's not a language. Every time we have to define with our readers and our users to mediate a set of rules. It's like a game in which you define, okay, these are the rules, and now we will use these rules to present some data. So also this mediation process, I think it's relevant in the communication.
Do you think that we should, this is quite important here in China, if I think about primary education, like STEM is really a big thing. And also STEAM as with the artistic part added. Do you think we should include visual literacy or advocate for a visual literacy like space in this education thing, or it would make a difference if you look like on 20 years of technology development? Maybe this is our next project together.
I think maybe not at the level of the letters of STEAM or STEAM, but I would say, personally, I would say yes, that we should advocate for, well, increasing the literacy of reading visuals, but also really in understanding what does it mean to read, to see a phenomenon through data. Because I think that now, well, this is a side thing, but one impression that I have, so it's not grounded on research, it's just based on experience, is that the more we see data, the more we the more people distrust data, because it's also simple sometimes to say, but the source is not solid enough, but the methods are not solid enough, to question this kind of process. And sometimes it's grounded at this kind of critiques. So I think that the next challenge will be, well, on a side, on reading data, using data, but also it will move toward this kind of challenge. So how can we critique the data that we see in a constructive way and not in a destructive way? Because otherwise you can say, okay, since everything depends on the authors and on the methodology, every data is equal to every other kind of data, which is of course not true, at least in my opinion. So that is a new challenge that we'll have to handle.
So we have a project.
Many.
Anybody in the room? No, good. So I think is also here we're good. So thank you, I would say.
Thanks to you.
Thanks everybody. Stand it up for a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
All right. So do you want us to close the streaming online before you do that, or you want to do it with the streaming online? 我们是在哔哩哔哩，所以我可以把这个全部就结束了，然后我们可以分享一下。我觉得你要来这里跟大家分享。Okay, so
okay, let's close.
Yes, let's close. Thank you again.
Thank
I
you
hope
again.
To see you soon. Welcome back anytime. Thank you everybody for being with us. See you next time.
Thank you for your time, really.